What if everything you've been told about aging and loneliness was a lie? What if the image of the elderly woman living alone, portrayed as sad and isolated, is actually one of the most empowering and fulfilling chapters of life? What if those senior women living independently aren't just surviving, but thriving in ways that would shock most people? Recent research has uncovered something extraordinary. Women over 60 who choose to live alone are reporting levels of happiness, mental clarity, and life satisfaction that rival or even exceed their younger years. They're discovering freedoms they never knew existed, pursuing passions they'd long abandoned, and experiencing a sense of peace that many spend their entire lives searching for. But society doesn't want you to know this. We're fed narratives about the dangers of aging alone, the necessity of assisted living, the burden these women supposedly place on their families. We're told they're vulnerable, lonely, declining. We're conditioned to pity them, to see their independence as a problem to be solved rather than a choice to be celebrated. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about aging, independence, and what it truly means to live your best life after 60. This isn't just a story about senior women. This is a story about courage, autonomy, rediscovery, and the revolutionary act of choosing yourself after decades of choosing everyone else. Welcome to the Heart Code, where we explore the profound truths about life that often hide beneath society's surface assumptions. I'm thrilled you've joined us today for a conversation that matters deeply, not just to senior women, but to all of us who will one day face the choices and opportunities that come with aging. Before we dive deep into this transformative topic, I want to ask for your support. If this video resonates with you, if it challenges your thinking, or if it provides value in any way, please hit that like button. It truly helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, experiences, or questions. Your voice matters, and your engagement helps build a community of authentic conversation. If you haven't already subscribed to the Heart Code, please do so now and turn on that notification bell so you never miss our content. We release videos every week exploring the deeper dimensions of human experience, relationships, and personal growth. And if you really want to support the work we're doing here, consider leaving a super thanks. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps us continue creating meaningful content that challenges assumptions and opens hearts. Today, we're tackling a topic that's both deeply personal and profoundly important. We're talking about women over 60 who live alone. And we're asking a question that might make some people uncomfortable. What if living alone at this age isn't just okay, but actually better than the alternatives we've been sold? We live in a culture obsessed with youth, terrified of aging, and deeply uncomfortable with the idea of older people, especially older women, living independently. There's enormous pressure on senior women to move in with family, downsize into retirement communities, or transition into assisted living facilities. The underlying message is clear. You can't be trusted to care for yourself anymore. You need supervision. You need help. You're a liability. But what if that entire narrative is wrong? What if the women who resist these expectations, who insist on maintaining their independence, who choose to live alone despite society's hand-wringing, are actually onto something profound? What if they've discovered a secret to happiness, fulfillment, and authentic living that the rest of us are missing? That's what we're exploring today. Not with judgment, not with naive idealism, but with honest inquiry into what senior women themselves are telling us about their experiences living alone. We'll look at research, we'll examine real stories, and we'll challenge our own assumptions about aging, independence, and what constitutes a good life in our later years. This isn't about romanticizing isolation or suggesting that every woman over 60 should live alone. It's about recognizing that for many women, Solo living after 60 is a conscious, empowering choice that brings unexpected gifts. It's about expanding our understanding of what's possible and celebrating the courage it takes to live authentically at any age. So let's begin this journey together with open minds and willing hearts. The revolution of reclaiming your life. Let's start with a fundamental truth that we need to acknowledge. For most women currently in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, their entire lives were structured around serving others. This isn't an exaggeration. This is the reality of their generation. They were raised in an era when a woman's value was measured by how well she cared for her family. They became wives who managed households, coordinated schedules, maintained social connections, and provided emotional support. They became mothers who sacrificed sleep, careers, personal dreams, and individual identity to raise children. They became daughters and daughters-in-law who cared for aging parents, managing medical appointments, medications, meals, and daily needs. They worked jobs, often while managing all these other roles. They volunteered in their communities. They showed up for everyone, always. They said yes when they wanted to say no. They smiled when they were exhausted. They put everyone else's needs first because that's what good women did. Now imagine reaching 60, 65, 70 years old. Your children are grown. Your parents have passed. Your career has ended or is ending. Your spouse may have passed or the relationship may have changed. And suddenly, for the first time in your entire life, you face a question you've never had the freedom to fully ask. What do I want? Not what does my family need? Not what's expected of me? Not what's appropriate or conventional? But what do I actually want for this next chapter of my life? For many women, the answer is space, autonomy, freedom, the ability to structure their days around their own rhythms, needs, and desires without constant negotiation, compromise, or guilt. Living alone becomes not a sad default, but a deliberate choice, a reclamation, a revolution even against decades of self-sacrifice. One woman I encountered in my research, 68-year-old Barbara, put it this way: I raised 4 children. I was married for 42 years. I cared for my mother-in-law for the last 8 years of her life. I have been needed, relied upon, and responsible for others every single day since I was 22 years old. When my husband passed 3 years ago, my children assumed I'd be devastated by the loneliness. But honestly, for the first time in nearly 50 years, I can breathe. I can make choices based solely on what I want and need. That's not loneliness, that's liberation. This sentiment is echoed by countless women who have made similar choices. They're not rejecting their families or their relationships. They're claiming space for themselves in a way that feels both long overdue and absolutely necessary. The myth of loneliness versus the reality of solitude. Let's tackle the elephant in the room immediately: the fear of loneliness. This is the primary concern that people express about senior women living alone. Won't they be lonely? Isn't isolation dangerous for mental and physical health? Don't they need constant social interaction? Here's what we need to understand. Loneliness and solitude are not the same thing, not even close. Loneliness is the painful feeling of being disconnected from others when you crave connection. It's involuntary, distressing, and yes, it can have serious health consequences. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness can be as harmful to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's linked to depression, cognitive decline, cardiovascular disease, and reduced immune function. But solitude is the intentional choice to be alone, to have space for yourself, to exist without the constant presence and demands of others. Solitude is restorative, it's clarifying. It's where creativity, self-reflection, spiritual growth, and deep rest happen. The women we're talking about, women over 60 living alone by choice, are generally experiencing solitude, not loneliness. They have social connections. They maintain relationships with family and friends. They participate in communities, whether that's religious organizations, hobby groups, volunteer work, or casual friendships with neighbors. But these connections happen on their terms, in doses and contexts that work for them, without the obligation and exhaustion that can come from living with others. Research from the University of California found that women over 60 living alone who maintain regular social contact, even if it's just a few meaningful connections, report lower rates of depression and higher life satisfaction than women living in multi-generational households with constant family presence but high interpersonal stress. Think about that. It's not the quantity of human contact that matters most. It's the quality. It's having control over when and how that contact happens. It's the difference between choosing to have lunch with your daughter because you both enjoy it versus living with her family and managing the daily tensions, different schedules, grandchildren's needs, and loss of personal space. A 72-year-old woman named Patricia explained it beautifully. "I see my grandchildren twice a week. Those visits are precious to me. We do activities together, we talk, we connect. Then they go home. I recharge, I process, I miss them, and that missing makes the next visit even more special." When my son suggested I move in with them to not be alone, I realized he didn't understand. I'm not lonely. I'm peacefully solitary. There's a world of difference. Solitude offers gifts that constant company cannot. It offers the gift of self-knowledge, the gift of peace, the gift of authenticity without performance, the gift of rest without guilt. For women who spent decades in constant service to others, solitude isn't deprivation, it's abundance. Autonomy and daily freedom. Let's get specific about what autonomy looks like in daily life for women living alone after 60, because this is where theory meets the beautiful reality of lived experience. Imagine waking up in the morning. There's no alarm set for someone else's schedule. You wake naturally when your body is ready. Maybe that's 6 in the morning, maybe it's 9, maybe it varies day by day based on how you slept, how you're feeling, what your body needs. You shuffle to the kitchen in whatever you slept in, or nothing at all if that's comfortable for you. There's no one to worry about, no appearance to maintain in your own home first thing in the morning. You make coffee or tea exactly how you like it, strong or weak, with cream or black, decaf or regular. You don't negotiate. You don't make 2 different preparations because someone else wants theirs differently. You just make what you want. You decide what to eat for breakfast. Maybe it's a nutritious bowl of oatmeal with fruit. Maybe it's leftover pizza. Maybe it's just coffee and you'll eat later. Maybe you're intermittent fasting and don't eat until noon. Whatever you choose is fine because there's no one questioning your choices. No one concerned you're not eating properly. No one expecting you to prepare their breakfast too. You decide what to do with your morning. Maybe you want to sit in silence. Maybe you want to watch the news. Maybe you want to listen to music or a podcast. Maybe you want to read. Maybe you want to do gentle yoga or stretches. Maybe you want to go back to bed. It's entirely your choice, and there's no one else's needs or preferences to accommodate. This might sound trivial, but these small moments of complete autonomy accumulate into a profound sense of freedom and peace. After decades of coordinating with others, negotiating preferences, and accommodating different schedules and needs, the simplicity of just deciding for yourself is genuinely revolutionary. Throughout the day, this autonomy continues. You eat lunch when you're hungry, not when someone else's schedule dictates. You choose activities based on your energy levels and interests, not obligations. You set the thermostat to exactly the temperature you prefer. You play music at the volume you enjoy. You keep lights as bright or dim as your eyes need. You arrange furniture for your ease of movement and aesthetic pleasure. One 65-year-old woman, Margaret, told me about her daily routine. I wake around 7. I meditate for 20 minutes. I have a slow breakfast while watching birds at my feeder. I work in my garden until mid-morning. I come inside, shower at my leisure, and spend the afternoon on whatever calls to me that day. Sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's baking, sometimes I meet friends for coffee or lunch. Sometimes I do absolutely nothing productive and feel zero guilt about it. Every single day is shaped entirely by my own choices and desires. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how precious? This daily autonomy extends to bigger decisions too. Women living alone choose their own healthcare providers and treatment approaches. They decide how to spend their money. They choose whether to travel and where to go. They determine their own risk tolerance rather than having anxious family members override their judgment. They set their own boundaries about visitors, phone calls, and demands on their time. The gift of silence and peace. In our modern world, silence has become rare and precious. We're constantly bombarded with noise, traffic, television, conversations, notifications, machinery, music. For women who have spent decades in households with children, spouses, and the general chaos of family life, silence may be something they haven't experienced in years. Living alone offers the profound gift of silence whenever you want or need it. Not the anxious silence of people who aren't speaking to each other, not the silence of loneliness, but the peaceful, restorative silence of being alone with your own thoughts, your own breath, your own being. This kind of silence has tremendous psychological and even physiological benefits. Research shows that silence can lower blood pressure, reduce stress hormones, promote better sleep, enhance creativity, and even regenerate brain cells in the hippocampus, the region associated with memory. For many women over 60, silence becomes a daily practice and refuge. They wake to silence. They move through their homes in silence. They sit with morning coffee in silence, watching sunlight move across the floor, listening to birds, feeling their own presence without the need to speak or respond to anyone. 67-year-old Helen described it this way: "My house is so quiet now. At first it was almost eerie. I'd lived with noise for 40 years. Kids, husband, TV always on, conversations, questions, demands. When everyone left and I was alone, the silence felt strange. But now I crave it. I protect it. It's where I find myself. It's where I process my thoughts and feelings. It's where I connect with something deeper than the surface chatter of daily life. My children worry about the quiet when they visit. They want to turn on music or the TV. They think it's depressing, but to me, it's sacred." This isn't about rejecting sound entirely. These women listen to music they love. They watch shows they enjoy. They have conversations with friends and family. But they choose when sound enters their space. They control the auditory environment of their lives, and they have access to silence whenever they need it for rest, reflection, or renewal. In silence, without the distraction of other people's needs and voices, something remarkable happens. You hear yourself. Maybe for the first time in decades, you hear your own thoughts clearly. You notice your own feelings without having to translate them into language for others. You connect with your own intuition, your own wisdom, your own inner voice that may have been drowned out for years by the volume of everyone else's needs and opinions. Rediscovering and reinventing yourself. One of the most beautiful aspects of living alone after 60 is the opportunity for profound self-discovery and reinvention. At an age when society suggests your identity is fixed, when you're supposed to be settled and done with growth and change, these women are discovering they're still becoming. Who are you when you're not somebody's wife, mother, daughter, employee, caregiver? Who are you at your core, stripped of all the roles you've performed for others? What do you actually enjoy, believe, value, dream about when there's no one else's expectations to meet? These are profound questions, and living alone provides the space to explore them deeply. Without the daily demands and distractions of living with others, women have time and mental bandwidth for real self-examination and experimentation. Some women are reconnecting with passions they abandoned decades ago, the art they loved in college but gave up when children came, the writing they dreamed of but never had time for, the musical instruments that gathered dust in closets, the love of dance, theater, or singing that got buried under more practical pursuits. One woman I spoke with, 63-year-old Linda, picked up the violin at age 60 after not touching it since high school. She practices daily now, not because she wants to perform professionally, but because making music brings her pure joy. Living alone means no one complains about the squeaky notes while I'm learning. No one makes me feel guilty about the time I spend on something that's not productive. I play for myself, and it fills me with happiness. Other women are discovering entirely new interests and identities. They're taking classes in subjects they never studied before. They're learning languages, studying history, exploring philosophy, diving into science. They're developing new skills, from woodworking to coding to photography. 69-year-old Judith started learning Italian at 65 and now spends several weeks each year in Italy, staying in small towns, practicing the language, immersing herself in the culture. I never traveled much when I was younger. Money was tight, and then there were kids' schedules and my husband's work. Now I go where I want, when I want. I've made friends in Italy. I'm learning about art and history. I'm becoming someone I never imagined I'd be, and it's exhilarating. There's also deep identity work happening for many of these women. They're examining beliefs they inherited without question. They're deciding what they actually think about spirituality, politics, relationships, success, happiness. They're shedding expectations that never fit them. They're becoming more authentically themselves. Sometimes for the first time ever, this process of self-discovery and reinvention is powerfully affirming. It contradicts the narrative that life after 60 is about decline, limitation, and waiting. These women are proving that life after 60 can be about expansion, possibility, and growth. That you're never too old to become more yourself. Health and well-being on your own terms. Let's talk about health, because this is often raised as a primary concern about seniors living alone. What about medical emergencies? What about managing chronic conditions? What about declining physical capabilities? These are legitimate considerations, but here's what research and real experiences show. Women living alone often have better health outcomes than we'd expect, precisely because they're empowered to manage their health on their own terms. First, consider the health impacts of stress reduction. Living alone for women who choose it typically means significantly lower daily stress. They're not managing interpersonal conflicts. They're not dealing with the emotional labor of maintaining peace in a household with multiple people. They're not accommodating others' schedules, preferences, or moods. They're not doing the invisible work of caregiving that so many women do when they live with family. Lower stress means lower cortisol levels, which affects everything: inflammation, immune function, blood pressure, cardiovascular health, even cognitive function and longevity. The health benefits of reduced chronic stress cannot be overstated. Second, women living alone typically have complete control over their health routines. They can prepare exactly the foods their bodies need without negotiating with others about meals. If they're managing diabetes, they control what's in the kitchen. If they have food allergies or sensitivities, they don't have to worry about cross-contamination or others' food preferences. They can structure their days around their health needs. If they need to exercise in the morning, they do, without working around anyone else's schedule. If they need to rest in the afternoon, they can, without guilt about not being available to others. If they need to take medications at specific times, they set their own schedule. 64-year-old Rosa, who manages multiple chronic conditions, including rheumatoid arthritis and type 2 diabetes, explained, "Living alone has actually improved my health management. I meal prep on Sundays for the whole week. I eat small, frequent meals that work for my blood sugar. I do gentle yoga every morning and evening when my joints are stiffest. I rest when I need to without feeling like I'm letting anyone down. I take all my medications on schedule. My doctors have actually commented on how well controlled my conditions are. It's because I can prioritize my health without competing priorities." Third, many women living alone are incredibly proactive about safety and emergency preparedness precisely because they're aware they're responsible for themselves. They have medical alert systems. They maintain regular check-ins with family or friends. They keep their phones charged and accessible. They organize their homes to minimize fall risks. They stay as physically active as possible to maintain strength and balance. In fact, studies show that the fear of losing independence is a powerful motivator for healthy behaviors. Women living alone often take better care of themselves, specifically because they want to maintain their independence as long as possible. Of course, there are real challenges. Medical emergencies can happen. Physical limitations increase with age. Eventually, many people need more support than solo living can provide. But the point is that living alone doesn't automatically mean neglecting health or being in danger. For many women, it means the opposite, being empowered to prioritize and manage their health in ways that work specifically for them. Financial independence and empowerment. Let's talk about something that's often overlooked in discussions about senior women: financial independence and the empowerment that comes with controlling your own resources. For women currently in their 60s and older, financial independence is something many fought hard to achieve. They came of age in an era when women routinely needed their husband's permission to open bank accounts or get credit cards. They often earned less than men for the same work. They may have sacrificed careers to raise families, leaving them with smaller retirement savings. But many women in this age group have worked hard, saved carefully, and now have their own retirement income from Social Security, pensions, savings, and investments. Living alone means they have complete autonomy over how those resources are used. This financial autonomy is deeply empowering in ways that go beyond the practical. It means making decisions about spending, saving, and giving based entirely on your own values and priorities. It means not having to justify your choices to anyone else. It means being able to prioritize what matters to you, whether that's travel, hobbies, supporting causes you believe in, helping grandchildren, or simply having security for future needs. One 71-year-old woman, Evelyn, described her experience. "My husband controlled our finances throughout our marriage. I had an allowance for household expenses, but he made all major financial decisions. When he died, I discovered I was more financially comfortable than I'd realized, but I'd never been empowered to make those decisions. Now I decide everything. I budget carefully because I'm naturally frugal, but I also give myself permission to spend on things that matter to me. I support 3 charitable organizations monthly. I pay for my grandson's music lessons. I bought myself a really good mattress because sleep is important. I took a trip to see the Northern Lights, which had been a dream for decades. Every financial decision is mine to make, and that feels incredibly powerful." Financial autonomy also means being able to live according to your own values without compromise. If you want to live simply and frugally, you can without someone else pushing for expensive purchases. If you want to splurge on organic food or natural health products, you can without being criticized. If you want to be generous with your money, that's your choice. If you want to hold tight to your resources for security, that's equally valid. Women living alone also avoid some of the financial conflicts that can arise in multi-generational households. They're not dealing with adult children who feel entitled to parental resources. They're not managing different spending philosophies or financial priorities. They're not feeling guilty about how they choose to use money they earned or saved. The practical benefit of financial independence is that women can make choices about their living situations based on what they truly want, not just economic necessity. They can choose to age in place in homes they love. They can modify their homes for safety and accessibility. They can hire help when needed for cleaning, home maintenance, or personal care. They have options, and options equal freedom. Curating your social life. Here's something counterintuitive. Women living alone often have richer, more meaningful social lives than those living with family. How is this possible? Because their social interactions are entirely intentional and chosen. They're not dealing with obligatory family time that drains them. They're not managing difficult personalities under their own roof. They're not socializing out of duty. Instead, they're deliberately cultivating relationships and activities that genuinely enrich their lives. Think about the difference. When you live with family, you're around people constantly, but that doesn't necessarily mean meaningful connection. You might be in the same house, but doing separate things, or dealing with tensions and conflicts, or simply exhausted by the daily negotiations of shared space. When you live alone and choose social interaction, you show up with energy and intention. You meet friends for activities you all enjoy. You have conversations that matter because you've carved out specific time for that purpose. You're not distracted by household concerns or other people competing for attention. You're fully present. Many women living alone after 60 have developed robust social networks. They join book clubs where they discuss literature with people who share that interest. They take exercise classes and develop friendships with classmates. They volunteer for causes they care about and connect with like-minded people. They attend religious services or spiritual gatherings and build community there. They pursue hobbies and meet others with similar passions. 68-year-old Dorothy describes her social life. I have coffee with my closest friend every Tuesday morning. I attend a book club on Thursday evenings. I volunteer at the animal shelter on Saturdays. I have dinner with my daughter every other Sunday. I take a watercolor class on Wednesday afternoons. I have neighbors I chat with regularly. My social calendar is actually quite full, and every single interaction is something I've chosen because it brings me joy or meaning. When I go home afterward, I can decompress and recharge. I'm never lonely, but I'm also never depleted by forced social interaction I don't want. The quality of these chosen connections often exceeds the quantity of contact in multi-generational living situations. These women are experiencing genuine friendship, shared interests, mutual support, and meaningful conversation rather than just proximity to other people. Technology has also revolutionized social connection for this generation. Many women over 60 are comfortable with video calls, texting, social media, and other digital tools. They can see their grandchildren's faces anytime through video chat. They can text friends throughout the day. They can join online communities of people who share specific interests. They can maintain long-distance friendships in ways that weren't possible in previous generations. The key insight here is that social health isn't about constant company. It's about meaningful connection, and that's entirely possible, perhaps even more possible, when you're intentional about when and how you connect with others. Domestic freedom and environment control. Let's talk about something that might seem mundane but is actually profound in its daily impact. Complete control over your domestic environment. This is one of those benefits that's hard to fully appreciate unless you've experienced the alternative. When you live alone, Your home is entirely yours to organize, decorate, and maintain according to your preferences, needs, and values. This might not sound revolutionary, but consider what it means in practice. You can keep your home exactly as clean or relaxed as you prefer. If you're naturally tidy and find peace in order, you can maintain that without someone else's clutter disrupting your space. If you're more relaxed about household tidiness and prefer to focus energy elsewhere, you can do that without someone criticizing or nagging you about cleaning. You can decorate in whatever style brings you joy. If you love color, you can paint walls in vibrant hues. If you prefer minimalism, you can clear away clutter and embrace simplicity. If you're a maximalist who loves collections and mementos, you can display everything without anyone calling it too much. Your aesthetic is the only one that matters. You can organize your space for your specific needs. As we age, our mobility and physical needs change. Women living alone can arrange furniture to create clear pathways. They can install grab bars wherever needed without worrying about appearance. They can set up whatever assistive devices or accommodations help them function best without anyone else's input. One 70-year-old woman, Patricia, transformed her formal dining room into an art studio. My ex-husband would have hated this. He liked everything traditional and proper. But I haven't hosted a formal dinner in 20 years, and I paint every day. So now I have this beautiful light-filled space with my easels, supplies, and works in progress everywhere. It brings me joy every time I walk through that room. My home finally reflects who I actually, not who I was supposed to be. Environmental control extends to sensory preferences that become more important as we age. You can keep your home at whatever temperature feels comfortable without compromise. You can control lighting exactly as your eyes need it. You can manage noise levels from complete silence to whatever music or ambient sound you prefer. You can control scents, avoiding anything that bothers you and surrounding yourself with fragrances you enjoy. You also control the energy of your space. Some people bring stress, drama, or negative energy into environments. Living alone means your home can be a sanctuary, a peaceful refuge from the world, infused with whatever energy you deliberately cultivate. Whether that's calm, joy, creativity, spirituality, or simply neutral peace, you're the only one determining the emotional atmosphere of your space. Time sovereignty. Time is our most precious resource, especially as we age and become more conscious of its finite nature. Living alone after 60 offers something remarkably valuable: complete sovereignty over how you use your time. Think about how rare this is in human experience. Most of our lives are spent accommodating others' schedules. As children, we followed our parents' and schools' timetables. As adults, we coordinated with employers' demands, partners' schedules, children's needs. Even in retirement, those living with family often find their time governed by others' rhythms and requirements. But women living alone, their time is truly their own. They can structure their days and nights according to their own natural rhythms. They can honor their own energy patterns, whether they're morning people or night owls. They can adjust their schedules based on how they feel each day without explaining or justifying to anyone. This time sovereignty manifests in beautiful ways. They can engage deeply in activities without interruption. If they're reading a compelling book, they can read for hours without someone needing their attention. If they're working on a creative project, they can enter flow states without disruption. If they're thinking through a complex problem or processing difficult emotions, they have the time and space to do so thoroughly. They can also embrace what some call slow living. They don't have to rush. They can spend an hour over morning coffee watching birds at the feeder and letting their minds wander. They can take long baths without someone banging on the door. They can prepare meals slowly, savoring the process. They can walk at their own pace, literally and metaphorically, without hurrying to accommodate anyone else. 66-year-old Miriam explained, "I spent 50 years rushing to get kids ready for school, rushing through work to get home for dinner, rushing through dinner to help with homework, rushing through weekends to manage all the household tasks. Always behind, always trying to catch up, always exhausted. Now, I don't rush. I do things at my own pace. If something takes longer, that's fine. I'm not keeping anyone waiting. I'm not neglecting anyone's needs. I'm just living at the speed that feels right for me. It's transformed everything." Time sovereignty also means the freedom to be spontaneous or to maintain routine entirely as you prefer. If you thrive on routine and structure, you can create and maintain that without anyone disrupting it. If you prefer flexibility and spontaneity, you can embrace that without coordinating with others. You can decide at the last minute to change your plans, or you can stick rigidly to your schedule. You can say yes to unexpected invitations without checking with anyone. You can say no without having to explain your reasoning. Your time is yours to gift, guard, and use exactly as you choose. Freedom from caregiver expectations. This is sensitive but crucial to address. Many women over 60 who choose to live alone have spent decades as caregivers, and they're done. They're not willing to step into another caregiving role, and living alone is sometimes a deliberate boundary against that expectation. These women have cared for children for 20 or 30 years. Some have cared for special needs children or adult children who needed extended support. They've cared for spouses through illnesses, addictions, or disabilities. They've cared for aging parents or in-laws, sometimes for many years. They've been the family member everyone relies on, the one who shows up in crisis, the one who sacrifices their own needs for everyone else. And they've reached a point where they need to care for themselves, not in a selfish way, but in a self-preserving way. They've earned the right to prioritize their own well-being after decades of prioritizing others. Living alone creates a physical boundary that makes this possible. When adult children assume mom will be the default babysitter, living separately makes it easier to set limits. When family members expect help with every crisis or need, not living in the same household makes it possible to choose when and how to help, rather than being the automatic solution. One woman, 72-year-old Beatrice, was remarkably honest about this. "I raised 4 children. I cared for my husband through 10 years of declining health before he died. I cared for my mother for 7 years after my father passed. I have been a caregiver since I was 21 years old. I'm 72 now. I'm tired. When my children suggested I move in with one of them after their father died, I knew what would happen. I'd become the live-in babysitter, the house manager, the family helper, and I couldn't do it anymore. I needed to finally live for myself." That's not selfish, that's survival. This doesn't mean these women don't help their families. Many do, in ways they choose and can sustain. They might babysit occasionally, help with specific projects, provide emotional support, or offer advice, but they're doing it from a place of choice rather than obligation, and they have the physical and emotional space to say no when needed. Setting these boundaries is often difficult. It goes against decades of conditioning that tells women their value lies in serving others. It contradicts family expectations that were built on assuming these women would always be available. It requires standing firm against guilt, pressure, and manipulation. But for many women, it's essential for their well-being, and living alone makes it possible in a way that living with family often doesn't. Intimacy and relationships. On your terms, let's talk about something that's often ignored in discussions about senior women: their continued desire for intimacy, romance, companionship, and even sexuality. These needs don't disappear at 60. What changes is often the willingness to compromise on how those needs are met. Many women living alone after 60 are open to relationships, but on their own terms. They might date. They might have romantic partnerships. Some have what are called living apart together relationships, where they maintain intimate partnerships with people they don't live with. This arrangement offers the best of both worlds: connection, companionship, intimacy, and romance, combined with independence, personal space, and autonomy. They can enjoy time with partners without the daily negotiations and compromises of cohabitation. 67-year-old Janet has been in a relationship with Tom for 8 years. They see each other 3 or 4 times a week, take trips together, and deeply enjoy each other's company. They've never moved in together. We both spent decades in traditional marriages. We both value our independence now. We love each other, but we also love our separate homes, our separate routines, our separate lives that we choose to intertwine. Neither of us wants to live together, and that doesn't mean we love each other less. It means we've learned what works for us. For some women, solo living means freedom from relationships that weren't serving them. They're no longer in marriages that were unhappy, unfulfilling, or even harmful. They're no longer performing emotional labor in relationships where they weren't valued or appreciated. They've chosen themselves, and that choice has brought unexpected peace and even happiness. Others are simply enjoying being single after decades of partnership. They're discovering that they genuinely enjoy their own company. They're not looking for relationship, and they're refusing to apologize for that choice. The key insight here is that women over 60 living alone aren't necessarily lonely for romantic partnership. Some have deeply fulfilling relationships structured in non-traditional ways. Some are happily single. All are exercising agency about their intimate lives in ways that honor their needs, desires, and boundaries. Spiritual growth and inner work. One of the most profound aspects of living alone in later life is the opportunity for spiritual growth and deep inner work. Without the distractions and demands of living with others, many women discover a spiritual depth they didn't know was possible. They have time and space for practices that feed their souls. Whether that's meditation, prayer, contemplation, journaling, or other spiritual disciplines, they can engage consistently and deeply. They can create sacred spaces in their homes. They can maintain morning or evening rituals without interruption. They can explore spiritual traditions, texts, and practices without having to explain or defend their choices to skeptical family members. 69-year-old Rachel describes her spiritual practice. "I've become Episcopalian in my 60s, something I never could have explored when I was married to my atheist ex-husband. I pray multiple times daily. I read scripture and spiritual texts. I've created a prayer corner in my home with icons, candles, and my prayer books. On Sundays, I attend 2 services because I find such peace there. My spiritual life has become the center of my existence, and it's possible because I have the solitude and freedom to nurture it fully." There's something about solitude that's essential for spiritual depth. Across religious and spiritual traditions, seekers have always valued solitary time for prayer, meditation, and communion with the divine. The contemplative traditions within Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and other faiths all recognize that solitude is where we encounter ultimate reality, however we understand it. For many women, this stage of life becomes a period of reckoning with big questions. What has my life meant? What do I believe about death and what comes after? How do I want to spend whatever time remains? What really matters? How do I make peace with regrets, losses, and roads not taken? How do I cultivate gratitude, acceptance, and even joy in this final chapter? These aren't light questions, and they require space to explore. Living alone provides that space. Without constant distraction, these women can sit with uncertainty, grapple with fear, and gradually develop a spiritual framework that brings them peace. Some women describe this process as finally meeting themselves at the deepest level. After decades of performing roles, meeting expectations, and living on the surface of their own lives, they're finally diving deep. They're discovering who they are at their core, beyond all the identities and accomplishments and relationships that have defined them. They're encountering their own souls. Creative expression unleashed. Something beautiful happens when women over 60 live alone. Creativity often flourishes in unexpected ways, without judgment, interruption, or the need to justify how they spend their time. These women are creating art, writing stories, making music, crafting, gardening, cooking, and expressing themselves in ways both profound and playful. The creative freedom of solo living manifests in multiple ways. First, there's time. Creativity requires time not just to produce, but to explore, experiment, make mistakes, and play. Women living alone can devote hours to creative pursuits without guilt about neglecting others or shirking responsibilities. Second, there's space. You can set up a dedicated creative area without negotiating for room or apologizing for the mess. You can leave projects in progress without having to clear them away for someone else's use of the space. You can surround yourself with supplies, tools, and inspiration without anyone calling it clutter. Third, and perhaps most importantly, there's freedom from judgment. You can create purely for the joy of creating, without worrying whether your work is good enough or what anyone thinks. You can be a beginner without embarrassment. You can experiment without explaining. You can fail and try again without an audience critiquing your efforts. 70-year-old Angela started painting at 65. Her house now is filled with her artwork, some of which she considers successful, much of which she describes as learning experiments. I'm not a great painter. I'll never sell my work or show in galleries, but I paint almost every day, and it brings me tremendous joy. I'm learning about color, composition, light, and shadow. I'm expressing my inner world in ways words never could, and I can do this without anyone questioning whether it's a worthwhile use of my time or commenting on whether my paintings are any good. I paint for me, and that's revolutionary. Writing is another common creative outlet. Women are writing memoirs, fiction, poetry, essays, letters to grandchildren. They're capturing family history, processing their life experiences, imagining new worlds, expressing thoughts and feelings that were suppressed for decades. Some are returning to instruments they played in youth. Others are learning music for the first time. They're singing without self-consciousness. They're learning to play piano, guitar, or ukulele through online lessons. Music fills their homes, and there's no one complaining about repetitive practice or beginner mistakes. Crafting, gardening, cooking, photography, dance, theater, and countless other creative expressions are flourishing among women living alone. They're taking classes, joining groups, sharing their work, or keeping it private, all entirely on their own terms. The significance of this creative flourishing goes beyond producing art. Creative expression is healing. It's life-affirming. It connects us to flow states where we lose track of time and self-consciousness. It allows us to process emotions, explore ideas, and express the inexpressible. For women who have spent decades suppressing their creative impulses, this late-life creative awakening is nothing short of transformational. Learning and intellectual engagement. Contrary to stereotypes about cognitive decline, many women living alone after 60 are voracious learners engaged in serious intellectual pursuits. They're taking online courses, earning certificates or degrees, learning languages, studying subjects they never had time for during their working years, and engaging with ideas at a depth that's only possible with sustained focus and time. Universities and online platforms like Coursera, edX, and others have opened access to world-class education for anyone with internet connection. Senior women are taking advantage of this unprecedented access to knowledge. They're studying everything from quantum physics to ancient philosophy, from art history to computer programming, from theology to molecular biology. They're learning not because they need credentials for career advancement, but purely for the joy of understanding, the satisfaction of growth, and the pleasure of intellectual engagement. 68-year-old Diane is working through MIT's open courseware in computer science. She's learning to code in Python and exploring artificial intelligence and machine learning concepts. I have no intention of changing careers or building apps. I'm learning because I'm fascinated by how these systems work. I have the time now to really understand complex topics. I can pause lectures, re-watch sections, work through problems at my own pace. My mind is more active now than when I was working. I'm learning purely for the sake of learning, and it's incredibly fulfilling. Language learning is particularly popular. Women are learning Spanish, French, Italian, Mandarin, and other languages through apps, online tutors, and immersion experiences. Some are preparing for travel. Others simply enjoy the cognitive challenge and the window into different cultures that language provides. Reading is another form of intellectual engagement that flourishes with solo living. Without interruptions, women can read deeply and widely. Many are working through classic literature they never had time for. Others are reading contemporary fiction, poetry, history, biography, science, and more. They're joining book clubs to discuss what they're reading. They're keeping reading journals, reflecting on themes, connections, and insights. The intellectual engagement itself is valuable, but there's more. Cognitive activity is protective against cognitive decline. Learning new skills, especially complex ones like languages or musical instruments, builds cognitive reserve. Staying intellectually engaged is associated with better cognitive function in later life and may reduce risk of dementia. But beyond the practical cognitive benefits, intellectual engagement brings joy, purpose, and a sense of continued growth. These women are proving that learning doesn't stop at any age, and that the later years can be intellectually rich, stimulating, and expansive. Managing grief and difficult emotions privately. Life after 60 often involves significant loss. Spouses die, parents die, siblings die, friends die, health declines, abilities diminish. These losses bring grief, and grief is messy, non-linear, and deeply personal. Living alone allows women to grieve in whatever way they need to without performing or hiding their emotions for others' comfort. They can cry whenever tears come. They can have bad days without explaining. They can talk to photos of lost loved ones without worrying about being judged as not moving on. They can maintain rituals and connections to the deceased in whatever ways bring them comfort. One widow in her 70s still sets a place for her husband at dinner on significant anniversaries. Her children would worry about this if they knew, viewing it as unhealthy inability to accept his death. But for her, it's a way of honoring their 50 years together, of maintaining connection, of processing her loss in a way that feels right. Living alone means she can grieve as she needs to, not as others think she should. Grief experts increasingly recognize that the old model of stages of grief that we're supposed to progress through linearly doesn't match how people actually grieve. Grief is cyclical, recursive, and lifelong. We don't get over major losses. We learn to carry them, to integrate them into our continuing lives, to find ways to honor those we've lost while still living fully. This process needs space and privacy. It needs the freedom to have days when you're not okay without having to explain or defend your emotions to others who think enough time has passed. Living alone provides that essential space. The privacy extends to other difficult emotions too. Anger, fear, regret, anxiety, shame, confusion, all the complex feelings that accompany aging and reckoning with our lives. These women can feel whatever they feel without censoring for others' comfort. They can work through emotions at their own pace, perhaps with the support of therapists or spiritual counselors, but without the daily requirement to present a particular emotional face to family members. There's profound dignity in being able to be fully human, with all our messy emotions in the privacy of our own homes. For women who spent decades managing others' emotions and hiding their own, this private emotional authenticity is deeply healing. Redefining success and purpose. Women living alone after 60 often undergo a profound shift in how they define success and purpose. After decades of measuring success by conventional markers, career achievement, raising successful children, maintaining marriages, managing households, they're free to define success in deeply personal terms. For some, success becomes about peace rather than productivity. It's about waking up content, moving through days with equanimity, going to sleep satisfied. It's about small joys, a good cup of coffee, sunshine on the floor, a conversation with a friend, a chapter in a compelling book. For others, purpose comes through giving back. They volunteer extensively, mentor younger people, support causes they believe in, use their skills and experience to make contributions they care about. They're free from the demands of full-time careers and intensive family caregiving, but they still want to contribute meaningfully. Living alone gives them the flexibility to engage in service on their own terms. Some women find purpose in creative expression, spiritual practice, learning, or cultivating beauty in their lives and environments. They're gardening, creating art, studying subjects they love, building friendships, exploring nature, or simply being present to each day with gratitude and attention. What unites these different expressions is that they're self-defined. These women aren't living according to someone else's definition of a meaningful life. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're not accumulating conventional achievements. They're living according to their own values, and that's incredibly freeing. 65-year-old Martha explained, "I spent my career climbing the corporate ladder. I was always striving for the next promotion, the bigger title, the higher salary. After I retired and my husband passed, I had to ask myself, what actually matters to me now?" The answer surprised me. I wanted simplicity, beauty, connection, time in nature, creative expression. None of the things I'd been chasing for 40 years. Now I live in a small cottage. I paint, I garden, I hike, I see my grandchildren regularly, and I volunteer at a hospice. By conventional standards, I've downsized my life dramatically, but I've never been happier or felt more purposeful. Living alone allows me to live according to these values without anyone questioning my choices or trying to pull me back into old patterns. Safety, practical considerations, and realistic planning. Let's address practical and safety concerns directly because they're legitimate and important. Living alone as we age does involve risks and challenges that need to be honestly acknowledged and thoughtfully managed. Falls are a significant concern for older adults. Women living alone need to be proactive about fall prevention, removing tripping hazards, installing grab bars, improving lighting, maintaining physical strength and balance through exercise, being cautious about medications that increase fall risk, and having a plan for what to do if a fall occurs. Medical alert systems are common and valuable. Wearable devices that detect falls and allow you to call for help provide important safety backup. Many women living alone use these systems and check in regularly with family or friends who will notice if something seems wrong. Health emergencies are scary when you're alone, but women living solo are often highly attuned to this risk and proactive about managing it. They maintain regular doctor visits. They manage medications carefully. They monitor symptoms and seek help early rather than waiting until emergencies occur. They have plans for who to call in various situations. They keep important medical information accessible for emergency responders. Cognitive decline is another concern. Who will notice if you're developing dementia if you live alone? This is where regular social contact becomes crucial. Women who maintain frequent contact with family and friends through phone calls, visits, or group activities are monitored informally by their social network. Concerning changes are more likely to be noticed and addressed. There's also the question of when solo living is no longer sustainable. Most women living independently are realistic that there may come a time when they need more support. They're making plans for that eventuality, researching options, having conversations with family, getting legal and financial arrangements in place, making their wishes known about care preferences. The key difference is that they're making these plans while they're still capable, rather than having decisions made for them. They're exercising agency about their futures to the extent possible, acknowledging that circumstances may change, but determined to maintain as much autonomy as possible for as long as possible. Safety concerns are real, but they are manageable with proper planning and precautions, and they need to be balanced against the very real benefits to mental health, life satisfaction, and sense of purpose that many women experience living independently. Confronting ageism and society's discomfort. Women living alone after 60 often face significant societal pushback, and it's important to name this for what it is: ageism combined with sexism. Society is deeply uncomfortable with older women who are independent, especially those who are content or even happy alone. There's an assumption that elderly women need to be taken care of, supervised, managed. There's discomfort when women reject these assumptions and insist on their continued autonomy and competence. Family members often express this discomfort as concern. They worry. They suggest moving in together. They question mom's ability to manage alone. Sometimes this concern is genuinely well-meaning. Sometimes it's rooted in unconscious ageism that assumes incompetence based on age. Sometimes it's projection of their own fears about aging onto their mother. There's also a gendered dimension. Society is somewhat more comfortable with older men living independently than older women. Men living alone are seen as capable, self-sufficient. Women living alone are more often viewed as vulnerable, at risk, needing protection. Women pushing back against these narratives are doing important cultural work. They're challenging assumptions about aging and capability. They're modeling different possibilities for late life. They're refusing to be diminished or infantilized based on their age. This often requires firm boundaries. It requires repeatedly asserting, "I'm fine, I've made the choice to live this way. I'm happy, please respect my decision." It requires not capitulating to guilt or pressure designed to make them doubt themselves or their choices. 69-year-old Sylvia described her experience. "My children were constantly trying to convince me to move into a retirement community or in with one of them. They'd send me articles about elderly people who'd fallen and not been found for days. They'd remind me of every little thing I forgot as evidence of decline. It was exhausting. Finally, I had to be very direct. I said, I am a competent adult. I have lived independently for 7 decades. If and when I need more help, I will ask for it. Until then, I need you to trust my judgment about my own life." It was hard, but necessary. They've mostly backed off now, though they still worry more than I think is warranted. Confronting ageism and sexism is exhausting. It shouldn't be necessary. But for women committed to living autonomously, it's often part of the reality they navigate. And they're doing it not just for themselves, but for all of us who will eventually age and want our autonomy respected. The gift of presence and mindfulness. One of the most beautiful aspects of living alone in later life is the opportunity for presence and mindfulness. Without constant demands and distractions, many women are discovering the profound gift of simply being present to their own lives. They're noticing things they rushed past for decades. The way morning light falls through windows, the sound of rain, the taste of food eaten slowly and with attention, the sensation of breath moving in and out, the feeling of their own heartbeat, the intricate beauty of nature visible from their windows or yards. This attention and presence isn't just aesthetically pleasing, it's psychologically and spiritually nourishing. Mindfulness practices have been shown to reduce stress, improve emotional regulation, enhance well-being, and even have positive physiological effects on inflammation, immune function, and cellular aging. But beyond the measurable benefits, there's something precious about being fully present to your own life. So much of human experience is spent either ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. We're rarely fully here now in this moment. Living alone, especially when combined with the awareness that time is finite, often brings a natural mindfulness. These women are here now. They're not planning for a distant future or striving toward long-term goals. They're appreciating what is right now in this moment. 73-year-old Grace describes her morning practice. "I sit by my window with coffee every morning. I don't read or check my phone, I just sit and watch. I see birds, squirrels, the changing sky, passing seasons. Sometimes I sit for an hour or more just being present. This practice has changed my life. I'm less anxious about the future, less regretful about the past. I'm here now, grateful for what is. Living alone gives me the space for this. No one's asking what I'm doing or why I'm wasting time just sitting. I'm not wasting time. I'm living it fully." Joy and unexpected happiness. Here's something that surprises many people, including sometimes the women themselves. Many women living alone after 60 report genuine, sometimes unexpected happiness. Not the euphoric happiness of youth or new love, but a quieter, deeper contentment and satisfaction with life. A sense that they've finally arrived at a place that feels right. The appreciation for simple pleasures, a gratitude for each day. A peace they didn't know was possible. This happiness comes from the cumulative effect of everything we've discussed. Autonomy, freedom from stress, time for pursuits that matter, meaningful social connections chosen intentionally, financial independence, creative expression, learning, spiritual depth, and the simple gift of living authentically. It also comes from the relief of not having to perform anymore. After decades of being what others needed, these women are simply being themselves. And it turns out that being yourself, even with all your quirks, limitations, and imperfections, is surprisingly joyful. Joy appears in unexpected places, in dancing alone in your living room to music you love, in eating ice cream for dinner without judgment, in spending an entire Sunday in pajamas reading, in laughing out loud at something funny without anyone asking what's so amusing, in making weird art that no one else would appreciate, in talking to your plants or your cat without self-consciousness. 64-year-old Pauline said something that stuck with me. "I'm happier at 64 living alone than I was at 24, 34, or 44 living with others. I don't have the energy I had in youth, but I have something better: peace, freedom, and the ability to appreciate what I have. I laugh more now than I did when I was younger. I find joy in smaller things. I'm grateful for my health, my home, my friends, my simple routines. I wake up most days feeling genuinely content. That's a gift I never expected aging to bring. Modeling alternatives for younger generations. The women living alone after 60 are doing something culturally important that extends beyond their own lives. They're modeling alternative possibilities for younger generations, especially for younger women watching and learning. They're showing that life doesn't have to follow a prescribed script, that you don't have to partner up, settle down, and stay in the same configuration for your entire adult life. That it's okay to change your living situation as your needs and desires evolve. That being alone doesn't mean being lonely or less than. They're demonstrating that women don't have to shrink, disappear, or become irrelevant after 60. That older women can be vibrant, engaged, learning, growing, contributing, and living full lives. That aging can be a time of expansion rather than contraction. They're proving that you can set boundaries with family without being selfish, that you can prioritize your own well-being without being self-centered, that you can say no to expectations that don't serve you, that self-care isn't indulgent but necessary. For younger women watching their mothers, aunts, and grandmothers navigate these choices, there's a powerful message. You get to design your own life. At every age, at every stage, you have the right to make choices that honor your needs, values, and authentic self. You don't have to live according to someone else's script. This modeling is particularly important in a culture that often views older women as cautionary tales or objects of pity. These women living independently and joyfully are rewriting the narrative. They're showing that late life can be a time of freedom, growth, and genuine happiness. The courage it takes. Let's acknowledge something important. Choosing to live alone after 60, especially in the face of family pressure and societal expectations, takes courage. It takes courage to prioritize your own needs after decades of putting others first. It takes courage to resist guilt when family members express disappointment or concern. It takes courage to trust your own judgment when society suggests you're too old to know what's best for yourself. It takes courage to be alone with yourself, especially if you've avoided that for decades, to face your own thoughts, feelings, memories, and mortality without distraction, to sit with silence and uncertainty. It takes courage to age visibly and unapologetically, without hiding away, as society often expects older women to do, to remain engaged with life, to keep learning and growing, to insist on your own relevance and agency. It takes courage to make choices that might not work out perfectly. What if you can't manage alone as long as you hope? What if you fall and no one finds you quickly? What if you become lonely? What if you regret your choice? Living with these uncertainties while still choosing autonomy requires bravery. The women we've been discussing are courageous. They're pioneers in a sense, living in ways that weren't common or widely accepted for previous generations of women. They're creating new templates for late life living, and that takes strength. But here's what many of them would tell you. It doesn't feel like courage from the inside. It feels like necessity, like the only authentic choice, like finally, after decades of living for others, living for yourself. And despite the challenges and uncertainties, most wouldn't choose differently. When solo living isn't the right choice, it's important to acknowledge that solo living isn't the right choice for every woman over 60, and that's perfectly okay. This entire discussion has been about choice, autonomy, and honoring individual needs and preferences. Some women genuinely prefer living with family. They find joy in multi-generational households. They want to be deeply involved in grandchildren's daily lives. They appreciate the constant company and the sense of being needed. They feel more secure with family nearby. These preferences are entirely valid. Some women need more support than solo living can provide. Physical limitations, chronic conditions, cognitive decline, or other health issues may make independent living unsafe or unsustainable. Recognizing when you need more help and making plans accordingly is wise, not weak. Some women are extroverts who find solo living genuinely difficult. They need more social interaction than occasional visits with friends can provide. They energize from being around people and find too much solitude draining rather than restorative. Some women have financial constraints that make solo living impractical. Housing is expensive. Healthcare is expensive. Living with family may be an economic necessity rather than a choice. The point isn't that every woman should live alone after 60. The point is that for women who want to, who find it fulfilling, who are thriving in that arrangement, we should celebrate and support that choice, rather than pathologizing it or pressuring them into alternatives. Choice is the key word. Whether you choose solo living, multi-generational households, retirement communities, or other arrangements, what matters is that you're making an informed choice based on your own needs, values, and circumstances, rather than capitulating to pressure or expectations. Practical advice for women considering solo living. For women who are considering or transitioning to living alone after 60, here are some thoughts and suggestions based on the experiences of women who are thriving in this situation. First, be intentional about social connection. Living alone doesn't mean being isolated. Build and maintain meaningful relationships. Join groups, pursue hobbies with others, volunteer, maintain regular contact with family and friends. Create structure for social interaction so you're not accidentally isolating. Second, think about safety proactively. Install grab bars, improve lighting, remove tripping hazards, consider a medical alert system, and maintain regular check-ins with someone who will notice if something's wrong. Being independent doesn't mean being foolhardy about risks. Third, stay physically active. Maintain strength, balance, and flexibility as much as possible. This is crucial for independence and for fall prevention. Find activities you enjoy, whether that's walking, swimming, yoga, dancing, or anything else that keeps you moving. Fourth, stay mentally engaged. Keep learning, reading, engaging with ideas and hobbies that challenge your mind. Cognitive engagement is protective and enriching. Fifth, manage your health proactively. Don't put off medical appointments or ignore concerning symptoms. Stay on top of medications. Develop good relationships with healthcare providers. Being independent means being responsible for your own health management. Sixth, create systems and routines that work for you. Find rhythms for housekeeping, meal preparation, medication management, and other daily tasks. Having systems reduces cognitive load and makes solo living more sustainable. Seventh, be honest with yourself about what you need. If you need more help, ask for it. If solo living isn't working, be willing to consider alternatives. True independence includes being realistic about your capabilities and limitations. Eighth, set clear boundaries with family. Communicate your choices and needs clearly. Be firm but loving. Help them understand that your choice to live independently is about what works for you, not a rejection of them. Ninth, plan for the future. Think about what you'll do if your circumstances change. Have conversations with family about your preferences. Get legal and financial documents in order. Make your wishes known while you're still able to do so clearly. 10th, give yourself permission to enjoy your life. You've earned this time. You've spent decades caring for others. It's okay to prioritize your own happiness and well-being now. Release guilt and embrace the gift of this chapter. Addressing family concerns with compassion for adult children or other family members reading this who are concerned about a senior woman in your life who lives alone or wants to. Consider these perspectives. First, recognize that your loved one is an adult who has successfully managed her life for 6 or 7 decades. Unless there's clear evidence of cognitive decline or unsafe decision-making, trust her judgment about what she needs and wants. Age doesn't automatically equal incompetence. Second, examine whether your concerns are about her well-being or about your own anxiety. Sometimes adult children project their fears about aging onto their parents. Sometimes concern is really about control or about easing your own worry rather than meeting her needs. Third, listen to what she's telling you about her experience. If she says she's happy, content, and managing well, believe her. If she says she prefers living alone, respect that preference. Your vision of what her life should look like may not match what actually brings her fulfillment. Fourth, offer support without undermining her autonomy. Help with tasks she finds difficult without taking over. Provide resources and options without pressuring particular choices. Visit regularly without hovering. Stay connected without smothering. Fifth, have honest conversations about the future without catastrophizing. Talk about what she wants if circumstances change. Discuss options calmly, make plans together. But don't assume that because something might become difficult in the future, she should give up her independence now. Sixth, educate yourself about senior independence and aging in place. There are resources, technologies, and strategies that support safe, independent living. Explore these options rather than assuming institutional care or moving in together are the only alternatives. Seventh, examine your own ageist assumptions. Are you assuming she's less capable than she actually is? Are you infantilizing her? Are you applying different standards than you would to a younger adult making similar choices? Eighth, recognize that her choice to live alone may actually be healthy and positive for her mental health, even if it's not what you would choose. Different people have different needs for solitude and independence. Ninth, find ways to support her choice while still staying connected. Regular phone calls, frequent visits, shared activities, helping with specific tasks. There are many ways to be involved and supportive without requiring she give up her independence. 10th, remember that your relationship with her will likely be better if it's based on mutual respect and genuine connection rather than obligation or enforced proximity. Quality time chosen freely often creates deeper bonds than constant cohabitation with underlying resentment or tension. We've covered an enormous amount of ground today, exploring why living alone after 60 can be not just acceptable, but genuinely wonderful for many women. We've looked at autonomy, freedom, self-discovery, health management, creative expression, spiritual growth, meaningful social connections, and so much more. The central message I hope you're taking away is this: women over 60 who choose to live alone are not tragic figures to be pitied or problems to be solved. They're autonomous adults making informed choices about their own lives. Many of them are thriving, happy, and experiencing a quality of life that surprises even them. This doesn't mean solo living is right for everyone. It doesn't mean there aren't challenges and risks to manage. It doesn't mean we shouldn't stay connected to and supportive of the older women in our lives. But it does mean we need to expand our cultural narratives about aging and independence. We need to recognize that there are many ways to age well, and solo living is one legitimate, valuable option. We need to respect older women's autonomy and trust their judgment about their own lives. We need to celebrate the courage it takes to live authentically at any age. For the women watching this who are living alone after 60, I hope this video has validated your experience and reminded you that you're not alone in your choice. For younger viewers, I hope this has expanded your understanding of what's possible as you age. For family members concerned about loved ones, I hope this has provided new perspectives to consider. Before we close, I want to ask again for your support. If this video has been valuable to you, please hit that like button It genuinely helps us reach more people with this message. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts, experiences, or questions. Your engagement creates community and conversation that benefits everyone. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Heart Code and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos exploring the deeper truths of human experience. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing this message, whether that's a senior woman living independently, a family member trying to understand, or anyone interested in aging, autonomy, and authentic living. And if you really want to support the work we're doing here at the Heart Code, please consider leaving a super thanks. Creating content like this takes time, research, and resources. Your financial support, whatever amount you're able to give, helps us continue producing videos that challenge assumptions, open minds, and celebrate the full spectrum of human experience at every age. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for watching all the way through this longer video. Thank you for being open to challenging societal narratives and expanding your understanding. Thank you for being part of the Heart Code community. Remember, wherever you are in your life journey, you deserve to live authentically, make choices that honor your needs and values, and be respected for those choices. Age doesn't diminish your right to autonomy, dignity, and the pursuit of your own version of a good life. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Keep questioning assumptions, keep opening your hearts, and keep living your truth, whatever that looks like for you. This is the Heart Code, reminding you that every stage of life holds gifts if we're willing to see them. See you in the next video.